All right, well, as the great Keith Johnson would say, all right, folks, welcome back to my garage turned woodshop evolution, where chaos meets organization and my sanity hangs in the balance. If you've followed my previous episodes, you've seen a shop that's either a mess or just downright unorganized. Translation, it stressed me out more than a mid-kid with no riz. My daughter will absolutely think that was cringe. Real. Anyway, dad speak aside, I finally decided to adult up and build some upper cabinets for what will undoubtedly be the most epic miter station YouTube has ever witnessed. Mental note, gotta nail that clickbait thumbnail before I hit publish. Okay, moving on. The first step was to break down all of my sheet goods into the pieces that will become the cabinet carcasses, shelves, and doors. And I bought all of these sheet goods, which, by the way, is 3/4 inch UV coated on both sides, or UV2S birch, from my local hardwood dealer West Vice Hardwoods in Nederland, Texas. And I am in no way sponsored by West Vice, but I love to support local, and I love to support folks who deliver a great product at a truly unbeatable price. West Vice has the best selection of sheet goods, hardwood, and hardware, like hinges and bloom style undermount drawer slides, at truly the best price you will find pretty much anywhere. Oh, and they do ship, by the way, so click the picture and give them a look-see. So thanks, West Vice, and, oh, if you're listening, have your people call my people, and maybe we can work something out. So, as I broke down the sheets into the different cut pieces for each cabinet, I meticulously labeled the pieces using this fancy cut list extension in SketchUp. After all, precision is my middle name. Well, after chaos, that is. I followed the cut sheet exactly, and the pieces came out perfect. Labeling the pieces for 8 identical cabinets was a key step in keeping everything organized and ensuring I didn't make any mistakes and waste any plywood or time. Because after all, ain't nobody got time for that. Here you see me cutting the 1/4 inch UV1S birch, also from West Vice, of course. That will be the backs of the cabinets. Now, cutting these bad boys without a track saw? No problem. Enter the AccuCut system from Craig, my makeshift solution until I can afford the real deal Festool track saw. Once I had all these pieces cut, I laid out where I wanted to cut the dados into the sides of the cabinets. So like any sheet goods, they usually aren't exactly the size they claim to be. So this 1/4 inch plywood isn't really 1/4 inch, and my dado stack with just the 2 outside blades is actually slightly bigger than a 1/4 inch. I could have made multiple passes with my regular blade, but I thought of a way to deal with the oversized gap during assembly, so I went ahead and used the dado stack. And I'll show you the solution later in the video. And I will also be insetting the back of the cabinet around 3/4 of an inch to allow for the nailer strips / French cleat blocks on the back of the cabinet. And again, since the 3/4 inch plywood isn't exactly 3/4 of an inch, I used a 3/8 inch setup block and lowered the blade slightly below it to route the dado to the center of the plywood. I ran a scrap piece through a few times to hone in where the dado would stop, and once I got it where I wanted it, I marked the sides of the cabinets where I wanted the groove to be routed, and then, well, I routed dados into each piece, of course. Since I don't have a mag switch feather board, I used a scrap piece of wood and clamped it to my fence to keep the workpiece down on the dado blade as it passed over it, and of course it worked like a charm. And those nailer strips will allow me something more substantial to screw into at the bottom of the cabinet and allow me to utilize a French cleat system to hang them at the top. Once that was completed, I switched out the stack for a larger stack so I could cut the dados to receive the top and bottom of the cabinets. I grabbed my dado sled and cut those into the sides as well. And I probably didn't need that stop block double-sided taped to the fence since the dado isn't a through cut, but I used one anyway. Oh yeah, and a couple of months back I actually took the time to hang my DeWalt air hose reel up on the ceiling of the shop, and man, Was that a great idea? Not only does it keep it up out of the way, but more importantly, I hung it up right over the table saw so I could essentially have the hose hanging down right above my cuts so I could use it to blow the sawdust off of the table or the crosscut sleds as I work. And having that thing up there has been so nice. Keeping that sled clean of sawdust helped me to ensure my cuts were a perfect 90 to the fence. And the hose is a 50-foot reel, so I could still use it to reach the cars in the driveway. And then, since my dados were a little inconsistent on the top of the sides, I used my trim router with a scrap piece for balance to clean up the dados a bit and ensure they were nice and flat across the length of the cut. And I guess I could have just used my router and my 6-in-1 jig from Tamar at 3x3 Custom to cut the dados, but I figured my dado stack in the table saw would be quicker. Maybe it wasn't. It worked out okay in the end. And I know I've mentioned this before in one of my previous episodes, but seriously, that 6-in-1 jig from Tamar at 3x3 Custom, if you haven't already gotten one, it's totally worth the money. And I totally should have used it in this application, but I simply forgot I had it. Rookie mistake. Next up, assembly time. I started by clamping one side of the cabinet to the table, and I used some homemade square clamping blocks to ensure the top and bottom of the cabinets would sit square while I assembled and screwed them into one side of the cabinet. I had a glue to each dado, and then from there, all I had to do was take the top shelf and the bottom shelf, insert them into those dados, and those dados made it really convenient as a positive stop to make sure I knew exactly where those shelves were going to be, and then clamped the top and bottom to the clamping blocks. So anyway, like I said, you don't have to do that, but I really like to build cabinets this way for that reason. That allowed me to flip the cabinet on its side and secure the top and bottom with a few 23 gauge pin nails that would hold them in place just until I could countersink some holes and add some screws. And this Milwaukee M12 pin nailer is the bee's knees, whatever that actually means. Oh, and another thing that I think I've mentioned in a previous video is this Amana countersink bit, which is super fantastic. And I used it to drill all of the countersink holes in the side of the cabinets. And again, I'm not really worried about these countersink holes because you're never going to see them. The cabinets are screwed together up on the wall and you'll never see them. So it worked out perfectly. Ah yeah, roll that beautiful squeeze out footage. Once I had the top and bottom secured with screws, I could flip the cabinet back on its side and slide in the back into the grooves routed into the side of the cabinet as well as the top and bottom shelves. The back will also help to keep the cabinet square until I get the other side attached. And I attached the other side in the same manner by adding some glue and then setting the side in place, holding it with some pin nails, and then sending home some screws. And let me just say again, if you're on the fence about this Milwaukee 23 gauge pin nailer, battery operated, buy it. Especially if you're like me and you have a super loud, annoying air compressor that's on its way out. I don't know, I just really like this battery operated pin nailer. Once the cabinets were all assembled, I switched gears to ripping down the nailer strips for the backs. I used the Jessam clear cut stock guides to help me rip some 45s on some plywood strips that will be both the French cleat to hang on the wall as well as the 45-degree strip on the back of the cabinet. Once I had all the nailer strips cut down, I could drill pocket holes in them, as that is the easiest way to attach them to the cabinets, in my opinion anyway. Oh, and if you happen to be wondering about that stool in the corner over there, yeah, that's my attempt at building a wooden Viper chair. I have a video for that too, but since I haven't quite finished the seat part, I haven't finished editing the video. Stay tuned to the channel to see that video once I finish that one up. And here you see me realize I just screwed the pocket holes on the wrong side of the strip. But don't worry your pretty little head, I was able to flip it around and fix it. And you'll never even know it happened. Unless of course you saw this video, but hey, we all make mistakes, right? And who has two thumbs and doesn't need a bunch of French cleats cluttering up their wall? This guy. One long cleat for all, thank you very much. So I marked out where I needed to cut some grooves into the side of each cabinet, and the grooves will allow for space to set the cabinet on the cleat, as well as room for the cleats to seat all the way on the 45-degree angles, if that makes sense. And all I did was figure out where I needed to cut the grooves, and then I marked them and used a multi-tool to cut them out. It was way easier to do this than hang a bunch of cleats on the wall. So earlier I mentioned how the dado stack for the 1/4-inch groove left the groove just a little too big. Well, I came up with the idea of simply adding a couple of strips of duct tape to the back of each strip before installing them on the cabinet to act sort of as shims. This would ensure the back of the cabinet would be pushed forward enough to close any gap between the back and the inside of the cabinet. And I've seen people use hot glue or even pin nails to keep the back of that cabinet up towards the front. But quite honestly, the 2 strips of duct tape worked just fine. It was a lot easier and less cleanup than the other alternative methods. Then I simply spent the next 30 minutes to an hour adding tape to strips and then pocket hole screwing them to each cabinet. And in the shot here, you can see how the groove on the side of the cabinet actually was above the top part of the 45, however you want to say that, but ultimately so that the cleat on the wall will go all the way up and basically make those 2 pieces meet and form one piece. I don't know if that makes sense, but it does in my head. And as you can see, that groove allows plenty of room for me to slip the cabinets over the cleat on the wall. And then it was just a rinse and repeat operation, building out the remainder of the 8 cabinets. And again, not only will these nailer strips give me something substantial through which I can attach them to the wall, but they also help to give a little more rigidity to each of the cabinets. Oh yeah, and that duct tape trick worked perfectly. There is no gap, and that back is tight in the dado now. Man, I'm a genius. No, really, I am. Just ask my teenage daughter. I added the cleat to the back wall of the shop after measuring up from the ground where I needed it to land to leave me with what will end up being a 2-foot gap between the upper and lower cabinets once I build and install them. The 2-foot gap will allow for a miter saw inserted into that bank of cabinets without the need for the uppers to be at different heights. I tested the cleat on the wall to make sure I would be able to slide the cabinets over the cleat and under the 1x2 trim near the ceiling. And once I knew it would work, I secured the cleat to the wall with 2 3-inch screws into each stud down the length of the cleat. Then, like a real dad, I shook the cleat on the wall and said, "That thing ain't going anywhere." Then I checked to make sure it was level all the way down the line. And well, remember when I said it was a genius? Yeah, of course it was level. Oh, and in that shot you could see that I did end up adding another nailer strip to the middle of each cabinet since they are a little tall and the middle of the cabinets were a little loose. I did that off camera, of course. And let me just say that if you're hanging cabinets on the wall without using a French cleat system, I think you're doing it wrong. I know, it's my opinion, but I think my opinion's right. It was so easy. Plus, I was able to do it alone without any sort of issues. Man, totally using French cleats from now on. Once I hung them on the wall and made sure they were all level and fit, I took each one down and used a Rockler shelf pin jig to drill holes for the adjustable shelves in each cabinet. And the jig worked great. Of course, the process of drilling all those holes in each cabinet took me about an hour, but it will be so worth it once I start loading them up with stuff. Being able to adjust the shelves is an absolute must. And in fact, you'll see here in just a minute that I go ahead and measure out where I want each shelf pin to go for all 3 shelves in each cabinet. And of course, since I'm editing this video, I've already loaded them up with stuff. And I actually moved about half of those shelves to account for larger or taller items. So yeah, adjustable shelves are definitely a must. And this jig, quite honestly, made it super easy to do. It just was pretty time consuming, that's all. Oh yeah, and there's that stupid loud air compressor I was talking about earlier. And I would have reshot this, but man, it was late and I was just ready to get this done. So, sorry for the noise. And as I hung them on the wall, I went ahead and secured them to each other and then used some cabinet screws at the bottom of each cabinet into the studs to secure them to the wall. I mean, they're super secure from falling by way of the cleat, but the screws in the bottoms make it to where you can't just lift the cabinet up off the cleat and then move them. Not that anyone would want to try and do that, but at least now I know they can't, even if they did want to. And I had actually recorded myself attaching the bottoms of the cabinets to the wall using those cabinet screws into studs, but the camera angle was in the complete wrong position. But you can clearly see in these shots here, there are screws at the bottom of the cabinets. You just didn't get to watch me install them. Then all that was left to do was use my Craig concealed hinge jig to add the 35mm pockets to the top and bottom of the cabinet doors so that I can install the Euro style full overlay soft close hinges, also from West Vice, you guessed it, into each door. And yet another awesome Craig product. Not sponsored by them either, at least yet anyway. And since I mentioned West Vice, let me just tell you about the price on these hinges. Similar ones at the big box stores are around $12 each at a minimum. The Bloom version of these hinges are around $21 a piece from Rockler. These ones from West Vice, $2 each. $2, seriously. And for shop furniture, it was a no-brainer. Man, I love that store. Fast forward through more meticulous drilling, leveling, and securing until voila! Cabinets hung, shelves adjusted, doors installed. And oh yeah, if you dig my organizational prowess, master carpentry skills, and if you don't mind, maybe hit the like and subscribe button down below. It helps the almighty algorithm know that this video needs to be seen by more people, and maybe, just maybe one day, I'll get sponsored and upgrade from duct tape to something more high-tech. That would be awesome. And of course, just like when you build a set of drawers, with the soft close, you have to open them and close them. You have to do the same thing with the soft close doors. And it really is just so satisfying to watch those doors close so softly. Ah. I used this cheap $11 jig from one of the big box stores to drill all of the holes for my handles and got them all installed as well. And just like that, I was done. And there you have it. Storage galore. I could fit a small village in these things and still have room for a dance party. A dance party? What am I even talking about? Anyway, I was able to pretty much fit all of the stuff that was cluttered on those 2 old workbenches, as well as a bunch of stuff I had lined up against the wall, up into these cabinets, and I still have space in those things. And of course, I still plan on building the cabinets for the bottom too. Man, I'm gonna have tons of storage, and that makes me so happy. See you on the next one.